Hi there, guys. Welcome to another episode of What a Time to Podcast. This week we are joined by the first other podcast,
First our other
other
podcast
podcast
guest. Yeah.
guests. So this is a very special episode, guys. We obviously want to get you guys entrepreneurs, etc. This week we've got people who've also started up. They've got a very similar story to us as well, in terms of how to start a podcast, get in front of the right people. So we thought that you guys would benefit as well, learning a bit more about not only podcasts, but learning another story as well, which is really interesting. So without further ado, here we have Suraj reporting live from India, and James as well from reporting live from London. How you guys doing?
What's up, guys?
Fantastic,
Good to be
mate.
here. Thanks for
Good to
having
see
us
you.
on.
Good to have you on. Good to have you on. We're really excited for this episode, especially. I think you probably can tell by the excitement that Fight the Real One is displaying here. But he's actually been really looking really forward to this one because it's the first time, like you mentioned, like having guests on who also have a podcast, and not just also have a podcast, but have a podcast that actually tackles the similar sort of issues and similar sort of the theme is basically almost the same, and of course everyone has their own approaches and stuff. But then we look at your podcast and we really enjoy listening to the points and the information that comes out of it, and it's just great. And so I mean we were just probably right at the start of the episode, but I will again to the viewers I'll really recommend go listen to Startup Blueprint. There's a lot of information coming through, and then we actually take a lot of inspiration from these guys in order to understand what is our journey going to be like in entrepreneurship and as well as podcasting. So let's go into it.
I mean, we're already into it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we want to talk a bit more about you guys' story. But just going into that, I mean, you mentioned, of course, James, just before we started recording already, the fact that the reason why you guys started the podcast was for networking purposes, get in front of the right guests. I think it's beneficial as well for both you guys just to expand on how you guys actually started, because I know that you, James, you initially were working the usual 9 to 5 role and then went into this full time. And Suraj, you're a very similar story, but you're just doing something part time on the side as well. I mean, so how did this come about for you guys?
Yeah, so it wasn't even 9 to 5. It was like a 9 to 2 a.m. Right? It was like investment banking, like a proper slog. I honestly, to be completely candid, if I was working your more standard like 9 to 5 office job, white collar job, I probably would have been disillusioned slower. That makes sense. But it's really the kind of situation that I was personally in that kind of really prompted me to just up sticks and make a snap decision. So I'll give you a bit of background. It's a story I love to tell, which is why we started the pod, right? So I just bought a flat about a year ago, and this flat's completely empty, right? No furniture, nothing. I didn't even have a bed for like more than half a year. I had a mattress in the middle of the floor. So I'm lying there, coming home from banking job at about 2 a.m. And I just want to relax. You don't want to go straight to bed because you're going to have to wake up at like 6 a.m. the next day. You just want to enjoy yourself for a bit, relax, put a podcast on. I'm like 2 hours deep into listening to this entrepreneurship podcast. And it gets to the point you look at the clock and you're like, why am I not creating this content myself? Why am I sitting here late at night just consuming when I could be a creator, right? So my first thought is let's go to my main man Suraj. Let me call him up. Let's get him on it as well, and we start the podcast. And it's kind of born of this desire to take control into your own hands, right? When you're working a corporate job, you never really feel like you have much control. There's always someone calling you on your phone, asking you, when is this going to be ready? When do you have to work for me? Are you going to be in the office today? Like, oh, can your approval for holiday? Yeah, I'm gonna have to push that up to my senior and this and that and all this bullshit, right? All this red tape. We all know that feeling. So it's really born out of this kind of how can we take matters into our own hands and become entrepreneurs down the line? And the best way to do that is obviously to surround yourself by the right people and learn from them as well. So there's this kind of dual benefit to our podcast, which is we get an increasingly larger network of the right kind of people we want to be around, be that in the entrepreneurship space, technology, venture capitalists. And at the same time, we learn from them and we give them a platform. So it's this nice kind of duality of what we offer. So yeah, that's how it started. And at the moment, it's really us trying to kind of get the word out and give practical advice to entrepreneurs. So, you can listen to a podcast episode and take something away from that day that you could implement into your business, whether you're kind of pre-MVP, you just have an idea, or whether you're trying to raise a fundraising round. We try and kind of give something to any entrepreneurs.
Right. Yeah. There was So you mentioned, whilst you were explaining, you mentioned my main man Suraj. So I think I would want to like kind of know, like, how did you guys meet? How did you kind of decide that, you know what, you should approach Suraj for this?
I'll let Suraj take that one. I want to hear in his own words.
Well, me and James actually met at university, so we were both went to Imperial, and we actually met in the boxing club. So I remember we were both training at the time in second year. I was walking through the hallway, and then he just stopped and goes, "Hey, what's up, man? What's your name?" So that started talking to him there. Sort of just hit it off. I mean, you meet someone, you just naturally both just bounce off each other, and a conversation sort of just seemed effortless. So we became friends like that. And then, when you're second year uni, obviously you get up to a lot of stuff that I'm not going to mention on a podcast. So we start going out, having fun, just enjoying life. And we had a lot of things in common. And it was almost like the same progression that we were both on in life. Because at a certain time, it's time to have fun. And at a certain time, then to look in the mirror, introspect, and say, all right, what am I doing with my life? It's time to switch up. And in my life prior to that, it had always been the case where I would go out. Like, I grew up in Ireland, right? So, we used to go out, drink from quite relatively young age. And there's a certain time where I kind of thought I want to kind of come out of all that stuff and focus more on where my life's going. And as a consequence, a lot of the people that I was rolling with at the time kind of fell to the wayside, and we kind of fell out of touch or less frequent contact. So I remember around the same time that I had the same I don't know, wouldn't say something as strong as an epiphany, but the same kind of realization at university. James was sort of going through the same thing, and we kind of were like, oh, well, that's really convenient, because we're both trying to now up the levels of where we're going in life. So the following year, we lived in the same house, and we've been very, very close friends ever since. Sort of rolled together in the same crew. So we're very close. Yeah.
I think that's a really good lesson as well. Like, if you have a vision where you want to go, you end up meeting the right people, as long as you keep
Absolutely.
your eyes and ears open. It's the same story with us as well. Like, we've been friends for a long time, but we actually were like, we love listening to podcasts as a whole. And to be fair, I think I more so at the beginning, because I had something else going on as well, similar to you, James. I just thought, listen to the content. Why not create something as well? And similar to you guys' story with Suraj and James, like, we just kind of came together. And of course, we had the idea of the app. That was your idea. And I think I'll let you explain like how you thought of the podcast as well.
Oh, I mean, yeah, the podcast was really, I think the main reason was for me, when I was kind of working on the app itself, I always wanted to get you on somehow. But at the same time, it was always like, because you can't just put someone on, and, you need to kind of give them a drive and passion for it sometimes. Well, not necessarily give them, but then, kind of use their passion and drive for it. And I always knew, this guy, he's great in sales. I mean, his voice already mesmerizes any sales call that's happening. And yeah, for me, that's what it was. We never even spoke about this. I never even told you this, but that was my main sort of encouragement for it. But then one day, I kind of thought to myself, oh, like, wouldn't it be great to actually have businesses? Well, it was ideally first barber owners, stylists. However, there was that mindset about, look, we are not just a booking platform for barbers, but we're a business, and what is the best way for us to kind of benefit from this? And then that's where the idea stemmed from, and I really wanted you on.
And we kind of evolved to where you guys already were at the start. You guys wanted to network and get in front of the right people. We became. That's how the vision started. We started from this advertise the app to where you guys are now. I suppose the question is, I mean, when you guys got to that point where you got together and you started, were there like any was the vision always the same for you guys, or did it evolve as well? Because it sounds like you guys had that idea from the beginning, and then it just kind of evolved a little bit, but there wasn't like a massive change in direction, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say James reached out to me, as he said, that night. He just messaged me saying, do you want to start a pod? And no context. So I kind of initially was a bit surprised. I was like, why would anybody want to listen to us just having random conversations? That was my thinking towards it. Because, for me, it's like no context, 3 a.m., phone goes off. want to start a pod. And like, you know, me and him, we chat a lot of shit in general. So I'm like, who the fuck's gonna want to listen to that stuff, man? And then he's like, no, you fool. We're not gonna chat about stupid shit. We're gonna actually bring high value guests on. I was thinking something like startups, entrepreneurs, and investors. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then he kind of extrapolated the logic to me that regardless what happens here, we bring these people on, we have an hour-long conversation with them. We both know that we're quite charismatic people and generally likable people, I'd like to think. So we then incorporate these people into our network, and we start actually having all these contacts. And with time, he said, imagine fast forward this a year, and we've done, you know, maybe 100 episodes. That's 100 people who are in their own right, each on the road to success and to achieving something. So then I was like, okay, yeah, that's a fantastic idea. So a piece of, just to extrapolate from that, I'd say a piece of advice for anyone looking to start a podcast is, what area do you want to start in? Because I've seen a lot of people who started podcasts, maybe recorded like anywhere from 1 to 10 episodes about something completely random, even like my friend suggested to me, hey, we always talk about really interesting stuff, why don't we start a podcast? Okay, great. Like one day we talk about some politics, the next day we talk about like religion or spirituality. It's like there's no theme to that. There's no direction to that. So there's no congruence with what you're actually talking about. And like, yeah, it might be an interesting convo, but at the end of the day, if I said, hey guys, here's a 2-hour recording of these guys across the world who you do not know, and it's interesting, you're gonna be like, that's just not relevant. I already have limited amount of time in the day. I'm not gonna take 2 hours of my day to listen to some random dudes talk about something that they think is interesting, right? So it's like thinking about your audience and thinking about what your interests are and how they can align with a higher value add for everybody, yourself, your audience, and the guests coming on. Because if you can imagine, like, we're having entrepreneurs coming on who are, some looking to raise investment, some looking to collaborate with other entrepreneurs, some looking to hire people. So to them, when they come on the podcast, they come at it from the perspective of, hey, maybe this is a channel that I can use because other entrepreneurs are going to be listening to this. So this is a channel that I can use to get my message out there and meet new people. And we've done, I'd say more than 24 introductions via email, simply through the podcast. Someone listening to it and saying, hey, that's a really interesting person, could you put me in contact? Or someone who listened to somebody else comes on the podcast, oh, I'd love to meet such and such, do you reckon you could make the intro? So the network kind of grows and expands like that, right?
Yeah. In terms of their network growth, then, would you say, because you guys mentioned, of course, you want to have a direction of podcasts, you don't want to just do random thoughts. Fun enough, that's where we were, and that was season 1, because we we're trying to get used to a podcast, and then we realized, this is just not the way.
Talk about random things.
We really were talking about rubbish things, to be honest with you. Probably should have got in touch with you guys way earlier, to be honest. But for you guys in general, you guys mentioned you want to build that network, you want to get in touch with the right people, and potentially even other people listening to this podcast, they could in a way get in touch with that too. I'm assuming that's been the get-go, the way it sounds like. That's what you guys wanted to do, and you guys have stuck with it. Is that right?
Yeah, that is pretty accurate. It's there's a number of like kind of nuances to that and the ways it's changed. One way would be that we actually kind of started out being quite regimented. So I know in my own mind, I wanted it to be like almost like these guys are coming to pitch their company. So we want to record everything about your business, why you're differentiated, who your target customer is, have you found product market fit, like what your distribution channels are, what your business model is, all of these kind of standard business questions. And we used to over prepare for these kind of episodes. So we'd have like these list of questions, and you listen to some of our earlier episodes, episodes with like kind of 1 through 8. A lot of it is quite robotic in terms of just asking these list of questions. But over time, what we've learned is actually do a certain amount of research, such obviously their name and where they work for and a bit of their background and kind of the industries they're in. But we found that by having the conversation as free flowing as possible, you're able to extract some really interesting nuggets of insight. Because I think what a lot of people don't appreciate is when you listen to podcasters, particularly like entrepreneurs, interviewing entrepreneurs of a certain standard, they have been on multiple, guest panels, maybe even TV interviews, podcasts, all of this stuff. There's probably upwards of 20, 30 pieces of media that they've recorded their voice on. So you start to see the same questions being asked over and over again. And if they're an entrepreneur, this is a very standard list of questions you can rattle through, but you're not actually interacting and engaging with the guest. So I think our mentality now is, how can we make each interview as memorable as possible? How can we ask probing questions that they maybe haven't been asked before? How can we extract information that other kind of hosts haven't been able to, just by asking intelligent questions? And I believe the kind of key to that is to literally have the conversation as free flowing as possible. Ask the questions that you need to, but kind of tack on to what they're saying and build and develop off of that. And we found that the conversation becomes a lot more natural, and you can have some really interesting insights from the guests.
Yeah, that's the power of a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's like kind of just looking back at other podcasts as well. Just like you mentioned, like for example, you've got Diary CEO, which is a highly successful one, and I kind of realized the type of questions that he tends to ask, they're all about emotional intelligence, and whereas us, we kind of look at experience intelligence. What sort of because mentioned what is your formula of asking questions?
I think it's an interesting one. So I would say, even though James and I are quite similar, there are certain avenues that I like to explore more and he likes to explore more. So I say the questions that James asks, and this is rough ballpark, right? It's never fixed, but just as the dichotomy of our personalities, he might ask more commercial oriented questions, tie in statistics, trends, but like, I read this, probably reads a lot more than I do about current trends and things like that too. Whereas I tend to ask more questions around somebody's experience, how that made them feel, or was that a difficult psychological block, like mentality based questions, right? Because I'm very interested in getting to know the personality of the entrepreneur, as well as the industry is interesting, but I find the personality a lot more interesting. Whereas I would say James probably has the reverse. So yeah, the personality is interesting, but let's learn about the industry too. So I think that complements each other. But I say all this to say that every single episode's different. It's never the case where we stick to these as paradigms of thought that we need to adhere to. It's like some episodes, someone comes on and we start talking about the philosophy of different nations, and like there was a guy, Christopher, that came on, and like how different like nation psyches have evolved. So he was talking about France a lot, and then I was talking about India, and then we're talking about the UK and the US and Ireland, and like generally like the average person in that country, how do they actually think? And we literally spoke to him about that for an hour. We didn't even ask him about his business. And in the last 5 minutes, we're like, mate, this is a really fun conversation, but we apologize for literally not even asking you about your business. He goes, nah, that's grand. That's completely fine. I really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks very much. So or sometimes, we start talking about the person's business and it turns into a full breakdown analysis of like what their company does, where they're planning to take it, their next steps. So it's very, very free flowing, because I think that you can learn a lot just from the mentality of the person you're speaking to. You don't necessarily have to speak to them specifically about the business, keep it rigid to that. Because as James said, like if they're a business owner, how many times have they talked about their business? They're probably talking about their business like every waking second of the day. So it makes it more enjoyable for them too, as an additional add-on.
100%. Like we've had that too. Like we've had episodes where we've talked about their life, and we've had episodes where it's just been about business.
Yeah,
but that's the power of a podcast, like I mentioned before, is that every episode is unique, every person is unique, and you can really delve deeper as well. So I think that's why we listen to podcasts, right, as well as producing them. I just want to ask you as well, actually, going on guests what you guys have had. I mean, what's been the most? This is a bit of a interesting question, but what has been the most interesting experience, or the experience that you guys have learned from the most with having guests in particular? It could be good or bad as well, by the way.
Are you asking about kind of what's the most interesting insight we've had from a guest, or kind of what have we learned about getting guests onto the podcast?
I think the insight part would be interesting, and then we'll go into the second part.
But you could also answer the other one too.
Yeah, it'd be very beneficial for us.
I think I'll go for the second part, and I'll let Suraj say the first part, because the second part is something that I've really leaned in hard, which is getting guests via kind of going to events, right, and meeting them in person. So as you guys know, there's loads of ways, but to get guests, and I think it'd be beneficial to any listeners who are trying to kind of network or start a podcast of their own. But we use a number of avenues. So we're using obviously cold outreach, and going to events and kind of setting up Zoom calls with people. And a lot of the time it's kind of, warm intros or someone you kind of half know, and you see on their LinkedIn that their mate has got a startup and they've liked this post and this and that, and you kind of get your inroads there. But what's really interesting is we've actually had guests where you kind of shoot out a tweet or something like that to an event. I'm going to SaaStock in Dublin, for example, where I went kind of a few months ago. And then people jump in your inbox and be like, oh, it's great, let's meet up there. And you'll just meet the most interesting people. I've had like 2-hour conversations off the back of people that I've randomly come across on Twitter, and they turn out to be great founders. And then you start introing them to people down the road and stuff like that. So I found that you have to be proactive with these things. Like, you can't just go through, what you think the standard channels are and ask around and ask your mates. You have to put yourself out there. And that can a lot of the time involve, maybe for a lot of people, stepping outside your comfort zone, kind of getting in front of these people, really going to in-person events. I found to be so productive because you kind of, there's not that air of, say if you jump on a Zoom with someone that you've met over LinkedIn, there's always that kind of air of, people are aware what the time is. They're aware that you have a half-hour slot. They want to get everything they want to say out, and it becomes quite a transaction experience. If you go to an in-person event, you can meet someone there and you can have an hour-long conversation, even 2 hours long, and not even mention business once, and just talk like your friends, and you've been friends for years. And that's why I say to a lot of people, it's like, have as many of these kind of random interactions as possible, and always treat these people like you've known them for years. If you can get that person leaving like, oh, I've made a new friend, and like, I'm going to call up this guy outside of business just to shoot the breeze and talk shit, right? Then that's a really valuable connection to have. And that's how we've been getting a lot of guests. And I think it's really important that you convey that kind of like, we're not here to just make this a transactional business relationship and you're going to jump on the pod and then that's that. Like, I want us to feel like we're boys and we can go forward and we can set up partnerships in the future, and you're comfortable introducing me to your circle and this and that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really good way of looking at it as well, because like we've with you guys, we already had a discussion before this. I was like, yeah, we want to stay in touch, but we've had like other guests as well where we've had conversations, and look, I'll be honest with you, some of them are people that we've already known, so that's been a bit easier. But we had James on like last time as well.
Yeah,
who was a life coach, and he actually very kindly like offered. He was like, "Look, like if you guys need some help, then let me know. I'll give you guys free sessions." Yeah, he was literally messaging us as well, and that was like really cool as well. This guy's very, very experienced. He's at CEO level as well. 25 years experience in finance banking as well, and the fact that we've made that network and that friend, it's benefited us, and it's benefited our views as well. So that's a really cool aspect.
Yeah.
That's the thing, man. I think you need to ask a question like, would I be doing this if no one watched, right? If no one watched or listening, would I still be doing this? And that's something that I ask myself about the podcast, is like, even if we didn't even upload this shit, like even if we got 0 views, we're still getting benefit out of it. Like, we built a connection with someone that we just spoke to for like an hour. We now have access to their whole network. They have access to ours. And it's about that kind of long-term thinking. It goes back to what we kind of just touched on at the start about getting caught up in the number of views. Me personally, when it comes to business, I don't think it's about that. I think it's more about, the people that you meet along the way.
No, 100%. That's amazing.